Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Dimbler Miller.
Nowadays, we experience all around us the surge of hatred against Jews. To discuss this, we have a guest from Israel who focuses on the psychology of hate. Dr. Ilana Heidemann is the CEO and founder of the Israel Forever Foundation, which works to promote personal connections to Israel. She studied under Elie Wiesel, with whom she completed her PhD in Holocaust studies, anti-Semitism, and phenomenology. Ilana, it's an honor to have you on our show. Welcome.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful opportunity.
Thank you. So, my first question to you is, how prevalent is the cult of hate today against Jews and Israel in societies in the West and elsewhere?
Every single space in the world, whether there are Jews there or not, it is prevalent because it has now become such a dominant element of every platform and stream of discussion, whether it's in education or private life, that at this point we're facing a generation of anyone you meet has the potential to hate the Jews.
Why?
Does it mean that everybody hates the Jews? No. Does it mean that they have it inside of them to hate? Yes. And that makes it so prevalent that it's almost impossible to fight.
Why is that? Why do they have it inside them now?
Hate against Jews never stems because of the hate itself. There's always a background reason, a deeper element of the human psyche that drives towards that hate. For years, it could be jealousy, the jealousy of the success of Jews. It could be resentment. It could be also a radical empathy for anybody who is the other than the Jew. In that case, of course, the Palestinians of today, for example. So there are always underlying ways that people are transferring their own issues onto the Jew, and that is an impetus for the hate. It makes it logical. It makes it simple and easy. It is actually easier today to hate the Jew than it is to defend them, stand up for Jewish rights, or have any understanding of what the war for freedom that Israel is actually fighting.
So in past centuries, people learned that, for instance, in their churches. Still, there are some religious influences today, but where do people in the West, for instance, in the younger generation, where do they learn this hatred towards Jews? They don't go to church, most of them. So where does it come from?
Well, we all know that it is stemming from social media, but that's not where it comes from. It's like the social media is the platform through which they are able to spread it so much more widely than they could if it was just traditional means of disseminating information. But there is, I believe, an actual innate something inside them, so that drives them to see the Jew as the other. So it can be coming from a social interaction or a social media interaction, but it justifies preconceived negative notions about Jews. The Jew is greedy. The Jew is therefore an organ harvester. Therefore, it must be true that when they say that Israel has killed off hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in order to harvest their organs. The chain of how these arguments get developed are a part of also that very common need today of hype and hysteria. And we have to really push the envelope of how much we accuse the Jew of, because they can literally get away with anything today. So where are they learning it? They are learning it not only in textbooks through some, shall we say, even subliminal messaging that has infiltrated over the last 2-3 decades into the school books. They're learning it from teachers who will interject a slight reference and it doesn't get questioned. If it does and it gets challenged, then no one knows how to respond. The Jew themselves that's in the room cowers in fear, doesn't want anybody to notice. I can even tell you that I was mentoring one student at a university in New York where the professor said, who are the Jewish students? Called out a name and said, you can leave the class or you can fail.
No.
And she got up and left. And as she walked out of the lecture hall, she noticed another girl who was kind of burying her face, like, don't look at me kind of thing. Well, this one student waited until the class got out and was standing over on the corner and saw the girl walk out. And she just delicately and secretively, so to speak, walked up to her and said, I saw you. She says, please don't talk to me. Nobody knows I'm a Jew. I do not want anybody to know. And she walked away. These are the real things that are happening. We hear the stories about what's happening on campuses, but we don't talk about what's happening in high schools, in middle schools, in the employment places, even in elderly homes. There are so many instances that sometimes we have to kind of create them with our imagination just because they're not being told. There was actually a report just released that 76% of all anti-Semitic events that happen to a person are unreported. And the number one reason that they're unreported is because most people either do not believe that there will ever be anyone held accountable, anything that can be done to that person. The process is so long, so tedious, and also creates an exacerbated feeling of anxiety in the person who already has to deal with that because they experienced anti-Semitism. So there's and by the way, let's not forget that within families, there's so much strife going on over where one stands on the issue of Israel's war. Mind you, that's just another form of anti-Semitism. It needs to be called out. And for 20 years, nobody's wanted to call it out. For longer than that. We know since the United Nations conference in Durban on racism, they keep revoking this. Zionism is racism. At this point, Judaism is racism, unless you're a good Jew. When you're a good Jew and you're toe the line and you're quiet about it, we'll accept you. But that's also going to be very, very short-lived. We have to be more aware that what your question being, where do people learn it? They learn it everywhere, and there's no one helping them to unlearn it.
I just was on a question and answer with Zoom with the Alabama Holocaust Education Center. And although I couldn't see the man, I could hear his Alabama accent really distinctly. And he asked a really good question. He wanted to know what a Jew is. And
That's right.
And I think that we, and I'm not pointing fingers, do not explain it. And I mean in a public arena, what is a Jew? And he wanted
because we shouldn't have to. Do you ask a person who is of a different ethnicity? Do you ask them, define yourself for me so that therefore I can, only of Jews is this demanded. And I don't think that most Jews also know how to answer. I don't think they want to be put in a box. Right now, we're dealing with some very severe labeling issues. Right? You've got progressive, left, liberal, reform, conservative, orthodox, ultra, Zionist, anti-Zionist, anti-Jew. We have, that's a word that I use very, very prominently because a Jew can be an anti-Jew. And people say a Jew can't be an anti-Semite. Sure they can. It means that we are denying the essence because you can't define what is a Jew. But we can get lost in trying to describe it again and again. And by then, frankly, we've lost our listener. Nobody really cares what a Jew is. However, Phyllis, I'll tell you that in answer to your question, I was living in Colorado for several years, and I had designed and ran for about 4 Holocaust education program throughout the Roaring Fork Valley. I really had the blessing of, finding the grant money and making it possible to bring Holocaust education to people who, like this gentleman from Alabama. And again, I'm originally a Kentucky girl, so I get that not everybody is surrounded by Jews and can just say, at least some version what a Jew is. But these kids knew nothing. And then I realized their parents knew nothing. And one kid says, "You mean I was just on a plane and I saw this man with side curls? Isn't that what a Jew looks like?" Because how do you depict a Jew? That's why people accept actually Nature Carta as official Jews, because they look like what a Jew is supposed to look like. But frankly, today we have to defy that stereotype. We have to say a Jew is a person who believes themselves, who identifies themselves as a part of the ancestral nation and the ancestral destiny of who the Jewish people are. If we stop the trend to divorce Jews from a 3,000-year-old heritage, if we don't stop that, we're only going to see more and more anti-Jews and Jew haters and anti-Semites, because each of these terms actually apply to a different form of what anti-Semitism actually is.
I just have to share this with you, Alana. So I was
Yeah.
getting an MBA at Wharton, and one of my teammates, I said, "I'm not going to be here. It's a Jewish holiday." And she said, "Oh, does your husband have those like thingies?" The only thing that she knew, she'd read the book, The Chosen. And so
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
is a real problem. So I grew up in
Yeah.
Elgin, where there were very few Jews also. I know exactly, Lana and I were comparing before this started. The point is, when they only have these few references, they have no idea what a Jew is.
And then let's add to the references. Let's add the fact that now demonization is the name of the game. If you demonize the Jew, you awaken the ability to make the hate logical, exactly as Hitler outlined himself in his first public letter in 1919, where he says emotional anti-Semitism will express itself in the form of pogroms and general riots, but logical, rational anti-Semitism will bring about the systematic elimination of the Jew. And that's what we see today. We're not seeing it in the line of, lists and cattle cars and gas chambers, which is what we're expecting. Oh, well, this is what it should look like. That's not what it's going to look like. Social media groups and work groups, these are the lists of today. They're already underway. The mapping project, which we have helped to bring awareness about, it actually used to be called the mapping project. And then they went ahead and just said it flat out, the map of liberation. So because they've used the same euphemisms that were used and outlined actually at the time of the Wannsee Conference by the Nazis, there's all these ways of, here's how you get the message to demonize the entity so much that they are not human and deserve, whatever's coming to them. Rape is resistance, beheading is resistance. And, with the news on our doorstep, we are all living in this fear of, can it happen again? Because we don't want to believe that it can, but we see people saying, I want to commit, I want to be a part of October 7th. It would be the joy of my life to bring October 7th to there was a chant they were chanting at some riots, at some of the rallies, October 7th again and again on every Jewish home and every Jewish head. And this was like, this is acceptable in the streets. Toronto rallies, they've got
of America,
and
right?
and Canada and Germany, but Germany, they shut it down. London,
But you're not
police,
talking about the streets of Gaza here. You're talking about the streets in the West.
Well, do we want to, we talk about what's happening in the streets of Gaza, and you have a video that was just published of a little girl dressed as a Hamas terrorist, screaming with a gun in her hand about how this is her destiny, she will kill the Jews. This is a 4-year-old little girl. Gaza has shown its face during these releases of our hostages, they have shown the world who they are. Mind you, Hamas showed the world who they were on October 7th, and the world responded, yay, you are our new hero. And since the hostage releases over these last weeks, Gaza is showing who they are, and the world is also saying, oh, you poor, starving Palestinian who has been the victim of the evil, evil Jews. And we're seeing this, we're hearing their chants, Khaybar, Khaybar al-Yahud. They are singing and singing with and kissing the fingers of the Hamas soldiers in their pristine new uniforms. These are the glorious Nazis of today. And we have to say that they're not only Nazis. We have to go back to the time of the Petliura massacres. And we have to go back to the Khmelnytsky massacres. And we have to go to generations of the names of the massacres and the murderers that we don't even know, that most people don't know. So going to the original question of where do they learn the hate? Here's the real question. How can we teach people to identify it, to resist it? And how can we create something that is not just reactive, but proactive to prevent the hate? Because that's going to be the only way that the next generation are not going to continue to be terrorists thirsting for the blood of more Jews.
Okay, go ahead, Evelyn.
Yeah, if we look at the Western street and college campuses, etc., and social media, is what is the most prominent driver, you think? Is it rational? Is it a lust for hate somebody and let's pick the Jews this time? Or is it hate lust? Is it a rational argument? Is it ideology? Is it what is it?
It's all of the above.
Poverty. I don't know.
It's all of the above. It's all of the above, and it's opportunism. Okay, don't forget, we live in a popularity contest generation, right? And so everybody is an opportunist, and I hate to say that we are seeing this also in the pro-advocacy issues. These are real social problems that exist in every society and in every generation. The popularity issue is one that says to people, I just want to be accepted, and if I don't join while my friends join, then I'm going to be cut out. And Jews have lost their friends everywhere. Peer pressure. Now, again, we can look at the examples even of, there's been the studies of the Einsatzgruppen, the special mobile killing squads who were responsible for the execution of over 2 million Jews in mass graves during the Holocaust.
Holocaust and we know we call it Holocaust by bullets.
Holocaust by bullets. And the firing ranges, who were the people who were committing the murders? They were not actually Nazi soldiers. They were a lot of local people who were convinced. And the studies, as you know, that were done of the amount of peer pressure being involved there was essential. Ideology was also essential. Opportunism, I think, is a very important one, that we know even from those days that people would be engaged in mass executions because they knew it would help them rise in the ranks of leadership, which would, of course, get them a cushier position. Maybe soon enough, they wouldn't have to have their hands dirty with the blood of Jews. They could be an over officer and, one of the overlords. This kind of opportunism is definitely one way. Don't forget, we have a well-oiled, well-funded machine that has popularized paying for activism. So you have this whole network of funded terror and terror accomplices. And there's no way to counter it without finding those funnels of money and trying to chase down the funders and stop the flow of cash. Pay for slay program that's happened amongst the Palestinians here in Israel, that is one element. But this pay for, shall we say, social slay, that's happening out in the world. They are getting paid to do campaigns. They have money to have thousands of bot systems. I'm sure you've seen all these, like hundreds and hundreds of phones, and they're just at their fingertips. We could not keep up with what they're doing, even if the biggest funders in the world woke up and channeled their money a little bit more wisely than really abstract, commercials and things and billboards that kind of miss the mark. We're really not effective in how we direct our funds. And I want to add one more element of why it's so widespread, which is fear. It's fear of isolation. If I think that there's a risk that I'm going to become a target, then I need to align myself with the more threatening party. So they have created a logic based on that ideology. They are so logical in their hate that it is truly difficult, almost impossible, to convince them otherwise about the Jews or about it.
And
the logic is fundamental.
They created a logic, and they don't want to be isolated. Could you please be a bit more specific about who you mean?
Well, the system, the underground networks that started to establish themselves 30 years ago and decided to invest in sending a form of immigration jihad, if you will, where they started to send their students to American universities and to fund these universities. Little by little, it happened. And so now when we see the reports of how much these terror entities have donated to the academic institutions, and we have to also address the employment world, because that is a very, very big space. But in education, in lower school and lower level and higher level academics, it has been going on. They infiltrated, they became students. The students stuck it out. They were well funded. They are now the professors. The professors then became the deans. Every single level has been orchestrated with patience.
Was that the Muslim Brotherhood? Was it Hamas?
All of the above, I believe, are actually creations to enable this original core. What would you call Yasser Arafat before he became the poster child for a newly invented Palestinian identity? Who was he before? Right? Is there a way that we refer to that entity? Not really, because they actually refuse to be called Palestinian. And we have to sometimes remind people of that. But people say, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that they're not an ethnic group. They identify as one, and so we must respect it. Really? Because ethnicity and race have an actual definition to them, and they have an actual application. So who are they? They are anyone and everyone who aligned themselves in some way with the agenda of let us figure out how to destroy the Jew. Now, that fight has happened since 1948, 1967, 1973, every single one of the wars. And it was only after 73 that they had to come up with a new way. And then we start to see, after this begins, this is their strategy, then it's the first intifada, and then it's the second intifada. So it has reshaped itself. It has morphed into every potential opportunity. And that's why I think this issue of opportunism is very, very important to address. People are making a killing off of being, bad choice of words. Wow.
Yes, yes.
But they really are, even before Kanye West's swastika t-shirt was taken down, I believe he had made $250,000 off of it. And I think it was only up there for an hour, not even, whatever. So, I think that that's one of the things we're not realizing, is that they are in every space. We have to address the medical fields. 2 Australian nurses who admit to either already having killed Israelis and a willingness to kill has now exposed many other individuals in the medical industries who have been a threat. I recall years ago, I was in Boston working on my doctorate, and I was in an accident. I was probably within the span of a few hours of this accident, exposed to so many different types of anti-Semitism. First by the police, who came and said, well, if you weren't wearing that Star of David, okay, like all of these kind of insinuations. And then I end up at the hospital. And you know what? There was no way that I was going to stay, because I got right away an encounter with somebody who made me feel unsafe. This was 20 years ago. So they are everyone and everywhere. And I don't say that out of paranoia. I say it to be realist, because, you know, we know history. We have to stop thinking it's going to look the same. We have to prepare for how it morphs so that we can shapeshift ourselves. That's what they accuse us of, right? We're like these witches, and we shapeshift ourselves. Okay. So we have to be smarter. And unfortunately, I don't think that the Jewish community of the world is living up to the expectations that we need to put on ourselves.
Can we talk about that ad that
Sure.
Robert Kraft's Foundation to Combat Anti-Semitism, and talk about
Yeah.
the Jewish community, just to explain to people? Evelyn said I have to explain since I don't follow football. Who wants to? But it was at the Super
I don't
Bowl, which
either.
is but it's the largest TV audience of the year in the United States to watch a football
Right.
tournament. And 30-second spots go for up to 8 million. So we can assume dollars, that we can assume that he could have paid that much. And 2 seasons before, Evelyn and I had a chance to see the ad ahead of time, and we already thought that the campaign was wrong in its language, because you could twist it. You could think stop Jew hatred could mean the opposite, that Jews hate you.
Jewish
And
hatred. Yes.
yeah. And then,
Mhm.
so 2 years ago, it was an ad that I thought was ineffective. Last year was an ad that, while Clarence Jones made no reference, apparently I don't remember this part, there was like anti-Semitism pictures in the back, so you would know. This year, there's absolutely no mention. Snoopy Dogg and Tom Brady. So Tom Brady's a football star, and Snoopy is a rapper,
Pop
right?
star. Yeah.
Talking about hate. How does that help us? What do you think?
It doesn't. Flat out. It does not help us.
Why not?
But if we are smart, we can turn it into an opportunity. Unfortunately, I don't think that that will happen. How does this happen? The one that was last year, where you had anti-Semitic graffiti spray painted on somebody's garage. And by the way, you should know that there were actually 2 different versions that were shown in different regions in the United States.
That I didn't know.
Okay. And so the one that I happened to be in America, because you know, it took a lot to get me out of Israel during wartime. I was not really, it was not easy to leave. And yet there I was, sitting in the back of the room, frankly, to be honest, crying my eyes out that I was living in war inside of me, and like hanging out watching a football game. It was very traumatic to go through that. So I think there's also an element we can discuss, which is how Jews in the diaspora versus Jews in Israel and around the world are actually coping with all of these dichotomies. But there I was watching this commercial, and you have a graffiti being erased by a Muslim, and then the Jew bending down to wash his feet. This was the commercial we saw. And then it said, stop Jewish hatred. And I agree with you. Stop Jewish hatred means the hatred is Jewish. People are often confused, which is the right way. You got to go with the noun adjective understanding, and people don't really get that in a 140 character kind of generation we live in. They don't have the grammar to understand. Jewish hatred implies that it is hatred that the Jewish people have. Jew hatred, which I will tell you generationally, many people hate this word, Jew hatred, and prefer anti-Semitism. Some people think anti-Semitism isn't sufficient, and Jew hatred is the right word. There's no right answer here. It's kind of like the question of who is a Jew, right? There's no one way. But I do agree that saying Jewish hatred has a risk to it. And when you make the message about combat all hatred, you are not actually saying to stop hatred of Jews. And neither one of these messages, the whole screaming at each other of this year's.
What was the ad? What was the ad?
This was the ad of this year
Yes,
with Snoop Dogg and Tom Brady, and they were standing there screaming insults at each other
right.
about why they hate you, why they hate the other. And it's like, it misses the mark because it also doesn't actually say why they hate. It uses cliche phrases, you know, I hate you because you're different. We just, you know, people are afraid to call out Jew hatred because they are more inclined to erase the Jew. And this made it easy. Keep it social, keep it light, keep it popular, and hopefully someone will get the message. I don't believe anyone did, but I would be very, very wary of criticizing Mr. Kraft, who I have great respect for the missed messaging. He's relying on marketing experts who are telling him, here's what your message has to be. Well, you know what? I think that they are the ones who are to blame for trying to kowtow to popular opinion instead of really pushing the needle and saying we are trying to save humanity. The fight for Jewish rights is about saving humanity.
Yes,
Only those
explain.
who are actually
I know what
only
you're
those who
saying.
are
Evelyn knows what you're saying,
yeah.
but you need to say it outright. What starts with the Jews
Okay.
does not end with the Jews.
Not end with the Jews. And it also is, if you're a part of saving the Jews, you're saving your own humanity. If you are in this battle against the Jews, then you cannot see the good from the evil because the Jew embodies the good. If we try to say that what happens to the Jews doesn't end with the Jews, that allows the listener to say, okay, but that doesn't mean it's going to affect me. It's the same thing as saying, well, it's the Zionists. It's not really me. I'm an okay Jew. I'm an acceptable Jew. So what happens to those Jews, you know, doesn't end with them, but it's still not going to get me because I'm acceptable. I'm on the right side. And why do they think they're on the right side? Because of streams of ideology like DEI. And by the way, there are so many other methods that are not called DEI, but they are falling into the same spectrum of an attempt to say that you have to de-Judaize the Jew in order to be included. You have to eliminate the Jew, and that means eliminating Jewish rights and Jewish history. I have no idea how any of these people actually could be potentially Christian and follow the Bible, or Jewish and show up anywhere with any sort of understanding or prayer. I mean, the people who you've heard about, right? The Passover Seders, where they did this past year, a Seder where they didn't mention Israel. I really am dying to see that Haggadah. How do you erase the Jew so much that as a Jew, you still think you have some sort of substance to you? I mean, this is a different topic entirely, but it brings us back to the question of how you create an $8 million advertisement to stop hatred of Jews, but you don't mention Jews. It comes from the same source, the desire to just ignore the Jew at all.
I would agree it's the marketing people, because without going into a long story, Evelyn and I had the opportunity to see that ad before it ever dropped. And so I managed to find someone who actually would speak to me on one of the teams, 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 who was, and then I said to him, do you understand what that word means? I mean, it can mean the other way. He said, oh, yeah, someone brought it up, but we decided that it didn't have any value. So it is the marketing people. So I apologize if Mr. Kraft thinks that I'm talking about him. I'm talking about the ad.
Well, and I think that we all need to be aware of that. I believe that donors are being misled throughout the Jewish world. Actually, the head of one of the Jewish federations just came out publicly, finally saying what some of us have been trying to say for a very long time. Those of us I run a very small grassroots organization, and I try to make a lifetime of impact through direct personal empowerment. And yet there are major organizations that are raising $1 billion, $2 billion, whatever their budgets are. And the donors are being misdirected by either financial advisors and consultants or marketing agents who are telling them that their money is being well spent. Don't worry, you can trust us. But those agencies are being manipulated by the need for numbers. Where am I going to get the most clicks and likes? It's not going to be from selling to the sold in the echo chamber. We have to push the needle. The problem is that they're pushing the needle in the opposite direction. And I believe actually creating a worse situation for defeating anti-Semitism, which can't be defeated. It cannot, can it be cured in somebody like any disease? You can heal. You can heal. I've met a reformed neo-Nazi in my life, more than once. You know, people who said, you know, thank God. A young woman I've mentored from Egypt who was raised to literally, she said, I was raised to believe that if I found a Jew, I should stab them. And then, you know, she woke up. So I do think it's possible, but can we eradicate anti-Semitism? No. It's an underlying current that will always be there. And we just have to be more proactive in saying out loud what it is, how it manifests itself. Do not let even the Jews who want to silence us from our uniqueness and the particularity of Jew hatred. There's a lot of that going on. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Shh, it'll go away. I had a student once say to me, if only we forgot about the Holocaust, there wouldn't be anti-Semitism today. I've had a student say to me, if there was no Israel, people wouldn't care that there were Jews. This is like a Peter Baynard kind of J Street mentality. And then you have those who say, well, if only the Jews would assimilate, then we'd be accepted and there would be no Jew hatred. Well, all of those three have been proven wrong in every single generation. Only when the Jews stand up, are strong, have courage, and do not care what the rest of the world says, no matter how terrible their lies, only then do we survive. And that's how we've survived for 3,800 years.
So what should we tell people to do now?
Get more involved, but it doesn't have to be done publicly. People don't want to always show up at rallies. Listen, we all have jobs. We're not getting paid by Qatar and Muslim Brotherhood and Cair to, you know, show up at these rallies. I mean, by the way, where are the people stopping that from happening? Where could it be stopped? Who would be the office that we would turn to say, you need to reject a permit for this rally? That's where people can get involved. They can be smart like we Jews try to be. Let's be creative in our thinking and not let the need for marketing schemes and numbers dictate. How about if those numbers had greater substance? So let's say, what do I think people should do? Again, right? Look old school. Look at small towns, and whether it's in Europe or in America, and think, what can we do locally that allows us to strengthen ourselves and not only rely on the larger organizations? Primarily, these organizations aren't necessarily interested in helping grassroots initiatives. They want their initiatives that they put their name on, but people don't want to be a part of the groups. They don't want to be on a list. They don't want to be identified, but they may still want to do something. So being active in social media is crucial. And there are committees and groups that you can join. We at Israel Forever, we have several that we try to keep people going. But at the same time, it's very difficult because people are afraid. They don't want to get targeted. They do not want to, they don't want to be afraid for their children. I have a mother who, she says, I want to do more, but I'm so afraid somebody will find out who I am. So can I be active and have an alias? So I helped her create an alias that would allow her to still be her real self without being afraid. People don't know how to have the information to share. Read it, learn it, do more to be more. That's what people need to know, that we cannot rely on anyone else to do it. And we have to find some virtual engagement. And again, that's the expertise of what we try to provide. Virtual engagement, ways that people are your listeners, they listen. What do they do next? That's the crucial part. And sometimes people don't know where to turn. So that's what I try to do.
That's great. That's wonderful.
You actually hit on something I think is very important. You talked about small towns, and I did several events in my hometown of Elgin, Illinois. It was kind of serendipity, but including visiting a synagogue with students. They one synagogue in Elgin. But that what you said is so important. Don't try and take on the huge mega cities. Go to small ones. Go see where maybe you can offer a program in a nearby town where there are absolutely no Jews. You don't even necessarily make it about Israel. Make it an engaging thing. So they see you
That's
don't
right.
have horns, et cetera, et cetera.
But don't shy away of making it about Israel.
No, I would agree, but I'm just saying, I just had a pushback by, I won't name, someone who misunderstood what I was saying about Evelyn and I have done interviews about the liberated ethnic studies curriculum in California. And I wanted my synagogue to
People need to
just
be more
find
informed.
information about which schools in LA, because it's such a huge district. And I got pushback from one of the rabbis who said, we can't take sides about Israel. I was beside myself. It wasn't about Israel. It was about
Right.
what kids are being mandated by the California. They have to take one semester of ethnic studies curriculum to graduate in California, and the curriculum is up for grabs. And many of the curriculum, whatever the plural is that word, are anti-Semitic. And that's what our kids are
Well,
being exposed
where
to
did
and
it
being
start?
groomed.
And where did it start? Where did it start, right? It started 20 years ago when young people came in and they rose in the ranks, and that's why these things happen. Massachusetts Teachers Association just hosted some of the most vile lies about Jews, public and Zionists and Israel, of course, but absolutely vile. But it's not new. It has been growing for years and years and years. Yes, getting involved in the educational councils, getting involved. But again, if you go top down, you're going to meet resistance. They're going to blackball you from having any engagement at all. Sometimes, what would be about doing an old school flyer brigade where you create a flyer, informative, positive, non threatening, and you print it and you go and you distribute just like they are. But we do it in a way so that we're reaching real people. And then you have to give those real people also a call to action because giving them the facts is also not enough. They're going to be like, okay, so you've given me facts that I don't know what to believe. You have to give people the next step. And again, it's an ongoing cycle and there's no one answer. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of funding for this type of grassroots activism, mostly because the funds are tied up in federations and larger organizations. So we're relying on those structures. You know, there's big government and there's big pharma. Well, there's also big org, and there's a danger to it. I wish that I could get, myself in front of these, a great donor, but at the same time, I think to myself, but then I'm up against his bureaucracy or her bureaucracy and her political ideology and everything that I have to jump through hoops for. So you know what I do? Israel Forever is primarily funded through grassroots funding. Individuals who believe in our mission and appreciate the resources that that I write and distribute every week. And those people have helped us be sustainable for 14 years. We keep going and we keep hoping and we keep wanting to enlarge our team. I'm a small team, just a few people, myself and a few wonderful, wonderful souls who help to keep the voice going. We really have to think as person to person as we can. That's what will save this generation.
And just for, we're going to put the URL for her organization in the
Oh, thank
description of this. So but we can say it now, israelforever.org. It's pretty easy to remember,
Israel.
israelforever.org.
It
Evelyn,
is
do you have,
because Israel isn't about Israel, the state, forever. It
yes,
is about Israel, Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, our identity, our pride, our faith. What have we learned from the released hostages? What kept them alive? Faith, a
absolutely.
belief, a belief that we have a state. Were we caught off guard on October 7th? Yes. Were there major mistakes by our security establishment? Yes. By the way, much of the same lackadaisical approach to the threats by the enemy that we are seeing by Jews everywhere in the world in the face of the anti-Semites. So we're really echoing each other's behavior, and not some people are really doing a great job working together. It's wonderful to see the kinds of alliances that are happening. But I think a lot of people are feeling like Israeli Jews or Israelis and diaspora Jews are two different worlds, like never to meet, right? Like we're two different mentalities. There's a lot is happening in that stream. I'm a member of the American Zionist movement, and we've been kind of in a big debacle of this issue of how are the progressive organizations who are displeased, for example, with the election, how are they utilizing the organizational structures to still advance their agendas? And they are doing it. They're doing it because the employees align with that ideology. They also are, shall we say, of a diasporic Jewish identity. You know what I mean by that? Where we say, I had somebody say to me, don't call me a diaspora Jew, that's an insult. I said, what do you want me to say? I'm an Israeli Jew, you're a diaspora Jew, you live in the diaspora. It says, but my identity isn't defined by that. And I've really explored this with students over the years, because to a certain extent, yeah, identity is defined by whether you live in the Jewish homeland or not. Because if you don't live here, you have a choice. You can support Israel and believe in Israel, or you can say, that has nothing to do with me. My Jewishness is like that Jewish hate. It's an adjective. It's something I happen to be, but only in the way I want it to be, how it suits my personal life. I think that the survival of Jewish people will depend on us seeing ourselves as Israel, as the nation of Israel and the destiny of Israel. So israelforever.org, we invite everyone to come and be recognized as a virtual citizen of Israel, a little card carrying member, so that you can say, we actually used to have this like card. I just got an email from somebody in Europe actually that said they were on the March of the Living 10 years ago, and they got their March of the Living VCI membership card, and they lost it in a terrible fire in their home, but they loved that card. It gave them a source of pride. Can they get another one? And I thought, well, it looks like we got to put some cards back on our merchandising, if people want this badge of honor. I think that our biggest goal is to inspire and empower personal activism, because that is how in the home, a mom, a grandparent, a father, of course, babysitters, young families who don't know where to turn right now, that's how we're going to help save them. When we say save a single life, we save an entire world. That's true in our activism too.
I think that that's a perfect ending. And I see that our time is up. So I thank you so much. This has been such a, I hate to say delightful, but it's been such an invigorating conversation. I would thank our listeners. If you want to know more about Evelyn and myself, you can go to Never Again Is Now podcast at YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And as we say at the end of every talk, we say, please speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.
Amen.